Hi, it is the breakdown. It is Marshall Ferguson. I feel like I'm talking with a lisp right now. My speech is weird trying to figure out how to talk once again. Marshall Ferguson, Derek Taylor right here for you on the breakdown. Canadian Football Perspective podcast. As always, we're brought to you by our friends at Fox 40. Visit fox40shop.com to check out Fox 40's latest innovation as DD throws it. What is that you got in there? Is that the marshmallow that you got in there?
It's one of those egg lip balms. I thought I'd just put it in my mouth, and then you and I would be quite alike with your tooth problems.
It makes my mouth hurt just looking at how stretched your cheek is, because I feel like I can relate to that. But as always, go to fox40shop.com. Check out Fox 40's latest innovation, the Fox 40 Tri-Layer Whistle Mask, helping you return to play safely. For 15% off Fox 40 products, visit fox40shop.com and enter CFP15 at checkout. It pains me once again this week to not be able to crack a fresh Soda City beer as well here off the top of the show, but I'm still finishing my pain meds. So I've avoided the heavy stuff, and I've been able to stay away from the T3s, which I actually want to have a larger conversation, I think, this week on Marshall Mello with Kyle Mello right here on CFP about how ridiculous pain medication is in football, because the idea of players becoming addicted to pain medication. I had one T3, right. And I'm not a big medication guy. Like I kind of like to try and do things relatively holistically and to try to eat as clean as possible and all that stuff. And
poplar bark, grass seed. Yeah, I feel
and so I had one T3, and my body just felt very strange. I was like, I don't actually know what this is. And I looked at the label. And I stayed up that first night. So I got my wisdoms done on last Thursday, it would have been. And that night, DT, I stayed up until 3 a.m. And I wasn't remotely tired. Like I was up until 3 a.m. and I didn't know why. I didn't understand. Then I looked at the label on the T3 and it said caffeine, codeine, and acetaminophen, which is just the ingredient that's in all Tylenol, right? And I was like, hey, well, I sure as hell don't need caffeine. Like I would have very much have preferred to have slept. And so I wasn't really happy about that. And then I was like, codeine. Okay, I've heard of codeine. I don't really know what this is. I look it up and it's like, yeah, codeine doesn't actually help with inflammation or pain management. It's just a narcotic that tricks your brain into thinking that it can handle pain better. I'm like, so it's not actually healing the pain and it's not dealing with the source of the pain. It's just making me think the pain is okay. I'm like, I don't really need that workaround either. So I had one T3 and I haven't had any since, and I've been avoiding them like the plague. And so I think that's an interesting conversation though on how people get kind of strung out on pain medication and the need for it, because it doesn't actually do much for your pain. It just kind of like works your brain into strange ways. But anyways, it's good to be back here, and it's good to be talking some football with you. I had some fun on the sports cage today as we were talking about all things CFL Combine. We're going to get into more of that coming up for you. Of course, I do want to mention Soda City Brewing offers brewery fresh beer delivered directly to your door. Visit their website at sodacitybeer.com to shop their wide variety of brews and to learn more. This April time is running out for you. Listeners are getting an exclusive promo code. Use CFP during checkout to receive free shipping on all orders over $100. Shipping is available to Ontario residents only. Must be of legal drinking age. I was talking to Jake from Soda City today via email, and he said that he's going to be sending us a whole bunch of their seasonal stuff coming up in the month of May, which is great that we're getting closer to the warmer weather, and we'll have some more variety that we're going to be talking about with our happy hour tastings with Sam Corbett. All right, I've rambled long enough. I would like to dive right into it with you because
you don't want to show your holes first. You don't want to show the YouTube folks.
I was thinking about that. I could just walk up to the webcam that I have here, all 4K of it, and stretch my mouth wide, but it's mostly just like yellow stitch lines in the back of my mouth that are not very entertaining. I got all 4 of them done, which I'm glad that I'm never going to have to deal with this again. But the idea of going through that one at a time or 2 at a time, I don't know why people would do that. I'm still in amazement that you didn't get any major anesthesia knocked out kind of stuff for this. You're a better man than I am, dude, because I don't understand how that's possible.
Yeah, it's amazing what trained professionals could do with a pair of vice grips and a lot of pulling.
It was so funny too. When I woke up, I I don't remember the last time I was put under. It might have been when I got my tonsils done, which was pretty early on in university. But other than that, I've never had major surgery, so I've never really had to get knocked out. And they did it. The first time was an oxygen mask, I'm pretty sure, for the tonsils. This time was an IV. And
Okay.
and the dude, it's funny because a lot of people are like, I don't remember anything surrounding anything. I remember from the second that they put the drip in to the second that I woke up is black, and I remember everything surrounding it. And I right before I go under, the guy goes to my right arm. He's like, "Hey, bud, here we go. We're just gonna, he's putting the rubber band around my arm, slaps it, and he goes into my right arm, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it looks like it didn't take on here." And I'm like, "Yeah, my left arm's usually better." And then he goes, "Oh wow, look at that." I go, "Yeah, there's like a massive vein right here that they usually use when I give blood or anything." He goes, "Well, we'll try this other one. Just we're already in here." So he pokes me a second time in the right arm, and it doesn't end up. And he's like, "You know what? Let's try the left." And he comes over to the left, and before I even know it, he's like, "Oh wow, look at that. That was super easy." I'm like, "I know. That's what everybody says who's ever taken blood or anything, tested me from anything." So he ends up doing that, and then I end up getting the IV. You doze off, whatever. You wake up, and when I woke up, it was shocking how not drowsy I was. I really thought that I was going to be knocked out and just sideways and need to be carried out of the hallway and all the rest. And
Yeah.
I woke up, and the woman was, I could kind of tell they were asking the questions to make sure that you were coherent enough to be able to go and get your family member to drive you home and all the rest. So they were asking me questions, and I was like interviewing them. And again, it might have just been the, coming out of it where I just felt no pain whatsoever. But there was a stretch there where I honestly was thinking, I can't believe how awake I am right now. I should not feel like this. I felt like I could have done a podcast or gone for a workout and all that, right? Like it was very strange to me that, because you always hear those horror stories, right? Of people just who are destroyed and they can't handle anything.
Yeah. I like the thought of oh, Mr. Ferguson, how are you feeling? Well, here's the thing. I want to attack the curl flat first because I just think that's going to be the way to go. If we miss it 2nd and 10, we're going to need a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Just have a seat. Yeah. I just, that'd be what would happen in my mind.
I did tell you on the sports cage that for some reason I went into promo mode, which I feel like,
right.
But I feel like that's a radio problem more than that's a me problem, where we're just ingrained to constantly be like, "Hey, and coming up after the break." And because the woman that was talking to me said, I saw that you had media listed as your employment, which, by the way, I don't know why the hell they need any type of employment genre listed on a form about whatever. Maybe it's just so that they can ask you questions when you come out, when it's all done, and see if you're okay and you remember anything. But and she said, "I saw it's media. What do you do?" And I was like, "Well, I've called Ticats games on the radio." And she goes, "Oh, my dad loves Ticats games." And I was like, "Well, if he loves the CFL, I do this podcast and it's called Canadian Football." And she's like, "Okay." And then I'm like, "If you want to, like, you can look it up and just like send to him." She's like, "Are you on Instagram?" And of course the kids. And I was like, "Of course we're on Instagram. We have to be on the gram." So I'm like, at CF. She's like, "Okay." And then she follows it. She's like, "I'll send it to my dad." I'm like, "Is your dad on Instagram?" She's like, "No." I'm like, "How are you going to send it to your dad then?" You can kind of tell she's like, it was a very like Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm where I start nitpicking and going, "So you're going to tell your dad, but he's not on Instagram. Did you just look us up on Instagram just to make me feel better?" Like, I felt like asking that. And I was like, you know what? This really doesn't matter. This one singular listener. So if he's listening to this, thank you, sir, for finding us. We do appreciate it. But I don't think that you're listening. And I think that your daughter was lying to me just to try and make me feel better about coming out from getting 4 wisdom teeth taken out.
The Larry David was an apt comparison. That was apt.
It could have been an episode for sure of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which I've been crushing, by the way. I don't know what you've been watching through. I've seen you tweeting some stuff periodically about going back through. Were you watching Ozark or Breaking Bad, or what have you been doing?
Yeah, so I'm on season 5, episode 3 of Breaking Bad. I've been able to get through the first 4 seasons in a couple of weeks. I know how the series goes. Like, I watched it all the way through in the beginning, but I'd forgotten so much about how great it was and how terrible Walt is to Jesse. And Jesse's a complete screw up, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
But Walt is such a jerk. It's amazing. But then he's such a genius too. And just had the season 4 where he does the thing to save all their lives. But you're like, oh, you're You've changed, Walter White. You've changed.
Yeah, we have tried to go back through, and I understand that this conversation has been happening for well over a year now, because that's where Canada is at large, is people having conversations about going back and binge watching things that they either have seen or haven't seen. We've been watching Curb Your Enthusiasm in such a strange way. So I love all comedy. Like, even if it's bad comedy, as long as there's something funny in it, I'm willing to give it a shot, because I think there's something to be learned from the efforts of others to be funny, even if it doesn't strike your funny bone, because you can learn something or pick up something different and kind of add it to your sense of humor, which is, I understand, is a very, artistic way of looking at things, when I'm really not that funny. But I do enjoy all forms of comedy. And so I've never watched Curb Your Enthusiasm because I never had HBO. I never had access, but I had Crave, and I had heard about it, and I stumbled into, I think it was when they started season 10, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been season 9. And I remember thinking, I'll give this a shot. And I watched like one episode. I thought, this is super weird. I didn't really like it at first, but it's one of those things that you have to invest yourself in more than a singular episode to kind of understand what they're getting at and what the premise is and who the characters are in the show and all the rest. And so my fiance and I, Marlene, we kind of, one episode, two, by the third episode of that season, we were hooked. But the problem is, we started watching it from the most recent. We didn't start from the beginning of the show because we were just giving it a shot with the new season that had just come out. By the end of that most recent season, the one from 2019 or 20, we were in love with it. So what we've been doing is watching it where it's like, we watch all of season 10. We go back to the start of season 9. We watch all of season 9.
Nice.
We go back to season 8. We watch all of season 8. So right now we're on season 7 or so, and we watch an episode or two a day when we get an opportunity. But it is, it's a strange way to watch a show, because Richard Lewis, his aging process, he dropped off a cliff when it comes to aging. I don't know what the hell happened to that guy, but she looked at me when we started, I think it was season 8, after watching season 9. She goes, he looks 10 years younger in a single year. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure there was a single year of production that was different between these two, but he looks incredibly different. I hope that doesn't happen to us on this show, where people go back and they listen to, the first episode after a year of this stuff. They're like, wow, why do they look 15 years older in 2022?
Yeah, well, one of us has a small child, so keeping alive. And I'm trying to figure out how to do 2.5 hours of sports a day in a pandemic. Yeah. Here's the thing I've taken away from Curb Your Enthusiasm, and it's interesting that they're both actors in Larry David shows, but Susie, who plays Susie, Jeff's wife in Curb Your Enthusiasm, and the character that Julia Louis-Dreyfus plays on Veep, Selena Meyer, they've convinced me that those two women are the best cursors in television history. Just the way they can rip off F-bombs and connect them to other words. Selena Meyer and Susie from Curb Your Enthusiasm, the best swearers in all of television history in my mind.
And there's nobody from Breaking Bad that you would put in there? Like, I would feel like that would be a fairly laced show with curses.
Oh, it is, but it's the creative way in which they do it. And for Susie, it's the way that she delivers it. Like, she's like 3 apples high, but she just destroys Jeff with a simple look. Or Larry does his Larry thing, and she's bleep you, just savages him. That's an incredible acting job on both those women's parts.
I totally agree with you. I love Julia Louis-Dreyfus in that, but I would also say that one of my favorite things now with Marlene is that I've picked up the Larry David at the end of episodes where he's run out of his luck and all of a sudden Bleep's about to hit the fan in 500 different ways, and he's about to be held accountable for all the lies that he's had and all the rest. When he just kind of looks off into the distance, he goes, okay. When he does just the okay. And so sometimes whenever, something happens to me where, it's 11:30 at night and my son has refused to go down and the dogs still need to go for a walk and the garbage has got to go out, and she'll look at me and say, you got to do this and that and that. And the dogs haven't been out. And I look at her and go, okay. I said, like, all right, well, I'm screwed. I can't do anything else about this. But hopefully we have an opportunity to watch some CFL football sooner rather than later so that we are all done with having to go back and binge watch old shows and all that. But you did have a conversation with Arash Madani on the Sports Cage out there in Regina today that I want to get the update on for right now as we are taping. on Tuesday evening, what is the most relevant talking point surrounding the movement forward here for the Canadian Football League season in 2021? What do you got for us? Because I'm out of the loop. I've either been sleeping, watching old Grey Cups, or crunching combine numbers that we'll get to in a minute.
So as of this exact moment that we're taping, no one has said the league is postponed for the year. The 21 season is postponed. It's going to be. It's going to be. We all know it in our hearts. Mm-hmm. It just hasn't been said yet. So the Board of Governors met on Tuesday, and from that, there was no announcement of a postponement. But what Arash Madani reported on The Cage today was that teams have meetings set among themselves for tomorrow. He said he's talked to people in offices, and they've got a meeting, and it's just called Update, set for Wednesday morning. And Arash's expectation is that that's the one where they'll tell the people who work for them, yeah, the season's going to be postponed, and then they will tell us as fans that, hey, the season's postponed. There's no way the season is not postponed, in my mind. I can't even envision when Ontario, where you are, isn't even potentially reopened until May 21st. We're never getting a June 10th start. We all know it. We all accept it. It'll be a matter of, will they name a hard date? Super unlikely. Will they name a couple of possible dates to give us as fans, as guys who play in the league, something to hold on to, something to watch for, and maybe something to kind of tweak our attitudes for, right? If we know we're fighting for something, maybe we're all a little more accepting of 2.5 hours in line to get the vaccine, or staying at home on a weekend and just only one of our family going shopping. So that'll be the thing to watch for on Wednesday.
Yeah. And when I think about the likelihood that things were going to go ahead as status quo and normal, again, if you're listening to this and for some reason that update has come out where they've said we've only bumped kickoff until Canada Day, and we're going to start without fans in the stands, and we're going to bring the play. Like if they come out of left field and they give us something completely different, then we are more than willing to eat this, because we see this as going the same way, because I think seeing the OHL decide that they're not going to attempt to come back on Tuesday, and seeing the way that the case numbers have been trending in Ontario, and seeing the fact that they have to do what they've had to do in Ontario. And I mean, if we would have done this back in February, March, we would have been better off. Start of April, we would have been better off. But here we are at the end of April, and we've gotten ourselves to a spot where there's 3 teams that are in this spot that they like to try and have fans in. And for me, DT, I was out for a dog walk the other day with Marlene, and I was talking to her about the league, as I'm sure you do with Fiona, and just kind of thinking about, okay, how is this trending that's similar, and how is this trending that's different from 2020? And what I came away from was like, okay, well, we've gone through the disappointment of the government funding stuff, which I don't know if that's going to change or not, or how that would change, but that's the reality, is that it felt like deja vu. When we saw that, I was like, okay, I remember this feeling. This isn't great. And then I remember kind of the feeling of cases going up and having that ominous feeling of looking at graphs that always seem to be kind of trending upwards. You're like, okay, that feels kind of familiar as well. And then you start to think about the statements that are coming from different ownership groups, and how some of them are promising a season, like Scott Mitchell, the CEO of the Ticats, who I have great respect and trust in. He's saying, count on it, bank on it, whatever the statement was he put on Twitter. And I believe that. Then you have other people who are saying, we're going to play even without fans in the stands, like Gary Stern in Montreal, which I love the fact that he came out and said that. But then it's like, well, are we going to start to hear the word bubble thrown around? Is that something that's still going to be on the table? Are we going to have to try and but that's what I'm saying is, like, if they come out and they say, in order for us to start the season in July, regardless of what's happening in various parts of the country, we have to start with a 6-game bubble and then disperse back to our normal place. As soon as you start making those contingency plans and they start to come out, and it's, well, if A fails, we'll go to B. All right, well, that's already happened. Well, if B fails, we'll go to C. All right, well, we're already there. And if you start to get into C, D, E, that's where I start to get concerned, where I go, this is the same thing that happened in 2020, was that things got dragged and drawn out so much that we saw the failures kind of get knocked down. And I understand 2020 is very much different than 2021 in the variables that are involved, but the emotions are the same. I think we can all agree
Yeah.
on that, where it doesn't matter what the actual specifics are. The emotions are the same and the challenges might be different, but the outcome thus far has been the same. We're still no government funding. We're still talking about delaying the season. And after you delay it far enough, we're going to have to start having the conversations of at what point when you're delaying do you start to think about, oh my God, we might not get a season in for the second year in a row. And I'm trying not to get my brain to that point so far, Derek, but I'm about 2 or 3, I would say, weeks and headlines and vague delays away from having to start to think that way.
Yeah, when you look at last year's timeline, it was, what was it, May 21st, where they said, okay, well, we're not going to play before September.
Yeah.
So any announcement that comes Wednesday, and of course we're taping on Tuesday, any announcement that comes Wednesday is a full month ahead of that. So at least there's that. There's vaccines are being administered in parts of the province better than, parts of the country better than others. So we're ahead of it in that way. We know what we're at. We may be getting a little antsy as individual members of the population and wanting to get outside and I want to get back to my life and la la la. But we have a better handle on it. We better know what to expect. And I think I just kind of look at it as a range of probabilities. There's a probability that we don't have a season in the CFL, but to me it is very minor. So it's worth factoring into that, but not like it was last year. There's a real strong probability of a small season or shortened season. And to me, a bubble is there are things that are just so prohibitively expensive. And I know Winnipeg was gung-ho and Wade Miller did incredible work trying to get a bubble for last season. I just think it's so expensive that they would just not want to consider that. And one thing we discussed on the show today was the number was thrown out a couple months back that it would cost $1 million per team for COVID testing. So will the CFL say, hey, guys playing for this team, please get the vaccine before you come, because the PGA Tour says if you have the vaccine, you don't have to get tested. So is there something in that? Because every player who comes having had both shots of this one or the one shot of this or the other one will ultimately save the teams potentially a ton of money throughout the season. So I think they're going to be, I mean, if the Bombers are posting a $7 million loss, which is really a huge turnaround from last season, negatively so, I really think that anything they can do on the health front that also cuts costs would be very much top of mind for them. So I think of it this way, like pretend Ontario is still a fiery hell pit that everybody who's outside it seems to believe it is now. You could start with 3 games on the road. You could start with, COVID's a little less in, pretend it's Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Okay, you guys are going to be home for the first 4 weeks of the season. This is how we're going to do it. It's not a bubble, but it's not exactly the way we want a season to go, but we think this might be the safest way to go. That to me is a solution. Whether it's a good one and a palatable one, who knows?
Yeah, but I think, when you put that on the table, that's the kind of situation I'm talking about, where you get to C and you have to drop to D. And all of a sudden, if you, for some reason, have something that goes haywire when you start the season with those games being played at home, and then you have to quarantine a team and then the schedule shifted. And it's like, that's what this whole challenge has been for a year and a half, 2 years, is every time that you try to build in a fail safe, if it fails and you're supposed to go to the fail safe, then you have to figure out what the next fail safe is. And at some point you just have to write things off. And I'm so with you on the idea of people being asked to, hey, can you get vaccinated because that'll save us a lot of money and get this thing off the ground? It's not going to be a problem for the players from the States. Like everywhere is saying, like President Biden tweeted out the other day that if you're 16 and older, vaccines are ready, go get them. And I saw that tweet. I think it was Farhan Lalji that sent that out. And he said, things I'd like to see, or, things you wish you could see in Canada. And I saw that and I just thought to myself, like, how much more comfort would we have in these conversations if that was the way that we felt? And it's, I'm living in the epicenter of the problem right now here in Hamilton and Ontario. And the reality is, like, we're not in a good spot. And you can feel the weight of that on everyday life. But at the same time, it's like we're so close to the light at the end of the tunnel, but it feels like we have to climb up a 400-foot ladder and over fiery rocks and down an icy sheet of snow slide. Or it feels like it's right there, you can see it, but you really got to be able to get through all of this mess in order to get there. And players being told, hey, can you get vaccinated? Like I say, in the States is great. In Canada, you're going to have a larger challenge with that based on the timing and the rollout and how all of the stuff is trending. And then there's also the issue that I don't think that we're talking very much about, because it's, in general populations, it's taboo. I feel like a lot of the time, where I saw that you tweeted out, hey, I got the vaccine, we're going to kick this thing's ass, let's go Saskatchewan. And I love that you did that. There's people that are being hesitant for whatever reason. And I think that, even LeBron James, who does so much good, he gets asked, hey, have you had the vaccine? And he just walks back away from it. And he's like, well, I don't want to talk about it. Well, why don't you want to talk about it, man? Because the idea of, like, man, there's dudes in the CFL that are going to have their own opinions, their own theories. There's a lot of interesting cats in this league that if they get told by the CFL, hey, you got to have a vaccine before you're allowed to come up here, what's to say we don't have like 2-3 guys per team that mysteriously just disappear before training camp begins, if that's the mandate that's been handed down, because they don't believe that their employer should be able to tell them to get a vaccine. And I think that is a real kind of interesting twist on all of this. Is your employer, your league is telling you that, but the CFLPA at that point, do they have to get involved and say, well, you owe this player a salary because you signed a contract and that wasn't in the contract originally, and the wording of things, you're not allowed to tell him what to put into his body. And it's, again, there's so many just strange hurdles that I don't have any answers to. I'm talking them out because there's so many different machinations of how this is going to hit roadblocks. And I can't wait for the day where we don't talk roadblocks anymore, where we just talk, hey, there's guys on a field, everyone's vaccinated, there's fans in the stands, and we're back to talking about normalcy.
Yeah, the PGA is doing it in interesting fashion. It's totally voluntary for their players if they want to get the vaccine. But there's the carrot of, hey, if you get the vaccine, you don't have to take these COVID tests. And if you don't get the vaccine, here's the stick, you have to have these COVID tests and you have to pay for them. Now, for guys who make $8 million a year on the course, much less how many millions off the course, paying for COVID tests for a 4-day tournament plus a couple extra days, no big deal. To a guy who makes $65,000 Canadian, if the CFL says, oh yeah, you don't have to, but you're going to pay for your own COVID tests.
Yeah.
That would be a real incentive to, one, get the shots, or two, not play. And it's a weird spot of like, well, okay, maybe if it was a big time player that wasn't going to play because he didn't want to get the shot, I would feel for it. But if you're a replaceable player and you don't want to get the COVID shot, and we as Canadians don't want to let you into our country without it, and our government doesn't want to let you in, and the league doesn't want to let you in without it, and you don't come, there's 1,000 guys who are not going to get drafted in the NFL that maybe they want to come and be the field side halfback for a season. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an uncomfortable spot to be in, but my choice was the second it was available to me in my age group. I got in line. I was there in my car, 2 hours and 45 minutes. I was cranking out some work. I was listening to some podcasts. I was watching some TV. I'm like, I'm getting this shot. Come hell or high water, I'm getting this shot. And it's very important that we all take COVID very seriously. We had a beloved member of the Saskatchewan community whose wife was the media woman for the Regina Riot women's football team here, passed away at the age of 42 because of COVID.
Man.
And you're like,
I think of that
was on people who didn't think this was serious.
I think of that, and I also think of Woodsy. For Warren Woods,
Woods, yeah.
And I've been thinking back recently about because I remember at the very beginning when shit got scary for the first time, and it was in and around that Rudy Gobert situation. I remember they had Bruce Arthur on SportsCenter, and Bruce had I forget what exactly the specialist was, but he was on SportsCenter, and it was essentially Bruce interviewing somebody from the medical community on SportsCenter for an hour straight. It was great that TSN did it. They threw them on TV and they're like, Bruce, go be smart. And Bruce was like, cool, that's what I do. And so he went up there and he started talking with them. And the quote that I came away with that rattled me that first time was when they said, how serious do you think this is going to be? And I'm talking, this is like March 12th or 13th of 2020. So we're 13 plus months beyond this quote. And I still remember it crystal clear because at that time I was still on radio. And I remember Sean Woodley, who does a great job covering the Toronto Raptors, was my producer on air. And Sean was in studio with me the next day. And during a commercial break, we talked about this. We didn't even talk about it on air because we didn't want to scare people, because at that point we didn't understand the seriousness and the severity of the situation. But the quote was, this doctor on SportsCenter with Bruce Arthur saying, how serious do you think this is going to be? And he said, by the end of this, if you don't know somebody who's passed away from it, you'll know somebody who knows somebody who passed away from it. And when we heard that quote, we're like, that's insane. There's no way that's reality. And now I'm looking at it, I'm like, I had conversations about CFL football with Warren Woods, and he's no longer with us. Like, you're talking about another person that is, a friend of a friend, or somebody who's 6 degrees of separation away. There are people here in Ontario that are friends of family members, or in all these age ranges, where I'm just thinking back at, because I think we live in this 24-hour prism of the news cycle renews, and we all wake up and it's all different. We all wake up, it's all different. And I like taking the long view on a lot of this stuff and trying to, again, there's a reason we called this Canadian football perspective, because I like the idea of having perspective on things and looking at them from different angles. And when I look back at the long view of this, we're to a point now where vaccines are available and we're inching closer to what we hope is a great 2021 season. And the idea that we might have people denying the available help for you when put in context with the risks of other things like I laughed. I saw this week somebody saying, man, if Americans are freaked out by AstraZeneca, wait till they find out about birth control side effects. And I was like, yeah, I was like, also wait till they find out the side effects of allowing everybody to carry a gun, because that's going pretty poorly as well for them in the States. So the idea of allowing these things to not have context, for me, I look back at that quote from Bruce Arthur interviewing that specialist on SportsCenter on March 12th or 13th of 2020. I just think to myself, man, if you would have said to me on March 12th, 13th, that A, that dude would be right, and that B, we would have vaccines available for a lot of people, and some of them would be turning them down, slowing this process, I wouldn't have believed you on either count. Like, I wouldn't have believed the problem that he was presenting, and I wouldn't have believed the solution. But it's gone 13 months, and we're in a spot now where the solution is, albeit slowly rolling out and inefficient, especially in Ontario, but we're at a point where it's becoming more available. And I'm with you, man. I can't wrap my head around if you told me right now, and I understand that people have probably seen this on social, but I genuinely believe this. If you were to offer up 24-hour clinics in any part of this country, I would crawl over glass for an hour to get there. Like, if we could all do that, how many people would just say, you know what? I'm done with this shit. Let's go out, let's get the vaccine, and let's just end this chapter and get ready to move on into the future, because people are so ready to move into the future, but you can't move into the future until this stuff is finally dealt with. And that's the same with the CFL season that we're talking about, to bring it full circles. We can't move into the next season until this stuff is dealt with. Like, we can't keep being halfway there and saying, well, let's kick off. And that's what I think this announcement that we're expecting to come out is going to be based in.
Yeah, I'm done with the people who want their right to get a ham sandwich, but don't acknowledge their responsibility to everybody else in society. Those people can just kiss off for me. I'm tired of it. Just go away. Just go away.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on all of that. Let's talk some football stuff here. We've been rambling about societal points. I hope you all enjoyed Derek and I getting serious and political and all the rest for the first 20 minutes here of the show. But it is
not enough beer going through here, Marshall. We need more beers to get in on this.
This is what happens with
somebody's on painkillers.
Well, thankfully, I've avoided all of the painkillers today. But I would say, which, by the way, the one painkiller they gave me is called Prometh, which I was a little bit freaked out by, because at one point, Marlene put an alarm in my phone and it just said, take your meth. And I wasn't crazy about that when I woke up. So, but yeah, between that and the amoxicillin, I believe, is the other one that I was taking. But I've been weeding off of them, thankfully. But I do want to talk some football stuff here, because it is CFL Combine week. And over at CFP, if you follow us on Twitter and Instagram, you've seen that we pump out some information on the Combine. And I do this every year. I've done it. I've done it on my personal Twitter handle, but it was part of the reason why I wanted to start CFP, because I'm like, I don't need to be blasting, whoever's following me with 75 draft combine profiles of guys that about 40 of them you don't give a damn, and about 60 of them won't end up mattering within 5 years from now. But I do it because I think that the combine is just an interesting vessel to provide more hype and more coverage towards the CFL draft itself. And the CFL draft, I believe, is a fantastic venture to be able to give more credit and more exposure to the great work being done by the people at the junior football levels, at the U Sports levels, at the CJFL levels, at the national team levels, at the Football Canada levels. To me, these things are not, they're presented by the CFL. They benefit the CFL. They are off-season moments that allow the CFL to gain a little bit of shine at a time where otherwise it would be quiet. But to me, I put out so much energy and information, or I try to, just to be able to bring to light, hey, there's some really good athletes that are going through this process. And even if they don't necessarily turn into incredible players, I really would like to be able to give you some idea of how much effort these guys have put in, because I look at some of the testing results from past year. Some of my favorite performances: Connor McGough, defensive lineman that came out of the University of Calgary, I believe got taken 4th overall or so by the Ticats, had an amazing combine. Junior Turner was another one who had just an absolutely monster. The best combine performance for my money, at least in a standardized setting, which we'll get into in a couple minutes here, was Anthony Parker. When he came out, he absolutely lit up every single part of testing. And so I like to try and present some of that stuff for people, because I do think that that's meaningful to give them some love. And so I started back when I started covering for CFL.ca, the draft and the combine. I found myself, they're like, hey, can you write an article? And this is how this really, all of the stuff that I work on, whether it's the quarterback tracking information or the draft, analysis, it all comes from a place of, I felt super useless when they were asking me to provide content. And, it came down to when I started covering the Ticats for radio and locally here in Hamilton, they said, hey, I need you to do a pre and post game show. And I was like, what the hell am I supposed to talk about? Because I didn't have any information. I was like, well, I can just go on there and just fart for 3 hours and say whatever comes out of my mouth, or I could try to have some information, which is why I started tracking games and trying to understand the game a little bit. It's the same with the combine. I wanted to talk about the combine. I wanted to talk about great performances, but you can't talk about great performances if you don't have any context. You have to understand where people land in the grand scheme of things. And so what I started doing was coming up with a system that allows me to actually tell you, the listener, the reader, the social media viewer, otherwise, in a relatively efficient manner, hey, this guy's good, because I can come on this microphone for a bunch of guys every single year and say, hey, he's athletic. That doesn't mean anything. Like, we know that they're athletic. If you watch them play football, that's great. Why are they athletic? How are they athletic? How does that match up? What parts of their game are most accentuated by their specific strengths and weaknesses of their athleticism? And how does that tie to what they do on film? How productive are they? All the rest. And so what I ended up doing was taking as much combine data from the past as I could get my hands on, which it's amazing because this stuff was essentially written on a piece of paper dating back to about 2001. Was when we actually realized maybe we should digitize this, or like hit file save. Maybe somebody will want it down the road. So I ended up getting that stuff. And over years, not kidding, years, I have logged the tests. And I understand that they've been different year to year, different systems used, electronic, hand time, whatever. But I've tried to log them all together and then essentially used a formula in a spreadsheet to get a percentile for how that person has performed in that test specific to the rest of the people at their positional group, because I think that's the most relevant comparison. I don't need to compare an offensive lineman's 40 to a receiver. So all I do is take all the receivers, dump them in, and compare it to all the receiver 40s, because if you're going to be a receiver, you're going to be compared to receivers. I want to know how athletic you are compared to receivers. And so I put that together. It's taken a long time to put together. I finally got it to a place where I feel like, I can punch in some information, and we're off and running to have a sense for what somebody's strengths and weaknesses are, which led to the stuff that you saw on social media, which is all the spider charts, radar charts, whatever you want, which some people aren't a big fan of those, of being able to describe information. Data visualization is not a huge strength of mine, but I thought when I first started doing this, that was the way that I had seen some people do it with the NFL combine numbers. And that was the way that I wanted to do it. And honestly, it's the way that's helped me personally most understand what I'm actually getting out of people in a combine setting.
Yeah, the radar charts have a little flaw, save for the linebacker from UBC who just maxed out the whole thing. Whatever the dodecahedron, he was perfect in all 20 of them, whatever it was. The radar charts can be a little deceptive, but you just have to go through each category and go, oh, percentile. This guy's in the 92nd percentile in these 3 speed and change of direction related ones. Oh, okay, that's very good. And yeah, like it's valuable information, right? If it wasn't valuable information, people wouldn't be collecting it. People whose job it is to determine who can play and who can't play wouldn't be doing it, wouldn't be bringing in this data for 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've tried to piece it together as best as I possibly can, and it's been a lot of fun, honestly, to try and figure out where people stand and how impressive they have been. Now, I'll get you at the end of this a little bit of a tease on an article that's coming out Wednesday on CFP about the top combine scores. And again, I'm not a math major, like I'm not an expert in this stuff. So my thinking on the combine score, DT, and tell me whether or not you think this is fair or foul, is that I take the 8 essentially testing actual performances. Like I don't rank people or give them percentiles based on the size of their hand or the length of their arms. I still put those on the radar charts, but that doesn't factor into their combine score. The combine score is the 10, the 20, the 40, and then it is the vert, the broad, the bench press, and then the shuttle and the 3-cone. Like those are the things that I just take those standardized tests that we've been doing forever, and I get a percentile for each of them. The combine score is the average, okay? It's the average of their percentiles in all 8 of those tests. And then I still put on their height, their weight percentile, which, man, that might be the most informative part of all, is when you just punch in the numbers and you see how they rank against people that are playing their same position at a CFL combine over the last 20 years. And you realize very quickly, okay, that guy is super lanky because I can see how long his arms are, but, he's a little bit small. That's a weird body shape. Or you see somebody who's, a French-Canadian fullback, let's say, like Felix Garin-Gauthier or Louis-Philippe Gregoire, who are from Laval and Bishops this year. Both of those dudes, fire hydrants. Like they're fullback, running back types, and they are short, stocky, heavy, great bench press, don't run the 40 all that well. But shuttle 3-cone is a strength because low to the ground, hips, quickness, whatever. And so you start to see over time, the more you study this stuff as I have, you start to see these trends. And I'll get it in front of this as well by saying, I talk to people in the CFL who actually work in front offices. They don't give a damn about 90% of this stuff. And I know that. Like I put this out, but the thing is, I put this out as a conversation metric. Those people that actually make the decisions and draft the players, they look at this as thumbs up, thumbs down. Let me see these numbers. If it's a huge red flag, we got to talk about it. If it's a small red flag, we might not talk about it. If it's a green flag, great. If it's a small green flag, don't really care. We already knew that. So it feels like it's a bit of confirmation bias on either end of this, but at the same time, they do use it as a way to be able to reinforce what they've already seen. But the eye is always the most important part of these conversations. And for me, I love the combine so much because it's this crazy circus event with a ton of pressure put on young men to perform in a very tightly packed environment. And those who go in and blow you away with their performances, that tells me that they can go into a pressure-packed environment wearing a helmet, shoulder pads in a game and use that same psychology. And it takes their performance actually testing on the field, and it allows me to be able to extract that and go watch some of their game film in a normal year where we haven't had a year off from U Sports football and look at what they've done on the field and say, okay, I saw a guy that ran a 4.67 or a 4.38 or whatever it might be. How do they match up when I see them play? For example, the UBC linebacker crew, Elliot Graham Ben Hladek. They are fantastic players, and I'm blanking on the last here. I'll get it for you in just a second. But they have 3 sensational linebackers right now that are at UBC that are coming out in the draft, and that I'm excited to see how they're all going to stack up against each other. But they would have played games in 2019 against Calgary's offensive line. Calgary's O-line that won the Vanier Cup in 2019 is going to have 4 players drafted, like Peter Nicastro, Tyler Packer, Logan Bandy, and Carter Como. Like those 4 guys are all going to get drafted, and all 4 of them tested extremely well. All 4 of them are monsters. And so you start to think, okay, now that I've seen great testing performances from Calgary's offensive line and great testing performances from UBC's linebacking core, I want to go back and watch UBC Calgary. Like that was my first thought when I saw those. I'm going, what the hell does that look like when you put those 7 human beings on the field and you ask them to play? Nick Cross was the linebacker I was thinking of that I blanked on for some reason from UBC. But I love the idea of taking that information and going back and watching those games, because now that I have the instructive guidance of Ben Hladek's an athletic freak from UBC, and I see, okay, Carter Como is one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen. I want to see what happens when you actually have a Nick Cross blitz loop around, Ben Hladek loops around him, and Carter Como and Peter Nicastro are right there. How does that play out on the actual football field?
Yeah. Do you buy that teams don't think about combine numbers at all? Like that's what people, these are not important. Really? Because we keep doing combines in both the CFL and NFL. And y'all seem to get pretty miffed when Jonathan Hardaway would bring his client but not let him test, or his client wouldn't test.
Yeah.
It seemed to bother you a lot. Are we really saying these are not important? I don't buy that at all. I absolutely believe they think these tests are important.
I think a big chunk of that is the ego that's involved in the finances that are involved as well, where it's like, if we're going to bring somebody and give your client the opportunity, we're going to fly you. Because I think the bone that was picked a lot of the times there was, we bring you in, we put you up in a nice hotel, we get you all this combine swag, we promote you on social media. You get here and you say, I will measure, I will have my dinner, I will have my Saturday morning breakfast, and then I'm leaving. It's like, well, that's an unnecessary expense for the league. I remember, I don't remember if Peter
You want my client, though.
Yeah, but Peter...
You want my client. You're going to want him in the draft.
Peter Godbear, I think, was from Rice, if I'm not mistaken, the offensive lineman that ended up going to the BC Lions. And I think he was one of those guys. It might have been in Saskatchewan or Winnipeg when we had CFL week, where the combine was kind of the marquee event. And which, by the way, the thought of being at Evra's place and having fans in a grandstand watching the bench press on a Friday night just is the best. It makes me so happy to just think about that, considering all the crap we're going through right now. But when he I think he was one of those who showed up, and immediately I had somebody from football ops come over to me and say, hey, we put him on a plane. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, we sent him home. Like, we're not gonna have him here. Oh, so you're not gonna let him do anything? No, he's gone. Like, he came in, he didn't tell us he wasn't gonna test. He showed up, said he wasn't gonna test, and we sent him home. And there's been other times I know where people have said, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna end up testing. And they've said, well, then we're just gonna send you home. And they're like, actually, you know what? I'll test. It scares them straight a little bit, because they go, I got this incredible job opportunity and exposure event in front of me here, and am I really going to pass that up because it's best for me, because I want to let my tape speak for itself? For some people, that makes sense. Wow. I mean, and to be honest with you too, DT, I think there's about 70 guys that I was able to get information for, that I would say out of that 70, about 45 to 50 completed every test in the virtual combine. Some couldn't because of injury. Others, like, if you're a receiver, I get a DNP on the bench press. I'm like, because you don't want to bench, because you think it doesn't mean anything to your future career. Like, it's the bench press doesn't matter to you. It might to other people, but out of that number, 45 or 50 people, I would say, completed everything. There were also 37 guys who were invited to either the regional or the national combine this year who just didn't participate. And some of them, like Deshaun Stevens, the linebacker for the Maine Black Bears, he didn't, because he just finished a 6-game season. Like, he was playing in the spring. Yeah. So he's not in combine shape. So why is he going to come off of playing 6 games in a spring season and going through this rapid fire camp and then throw himself out onto a testing field and run a 40 and hope that it helps his draft stock? No, like, for that guy, that's a legitimate reason why he doesn't want to. But there's a lot of people where it wouldn't have taken a lot of effort for them to get a video camera out that played in the fall that are preparing for, let's say, the NFL draft, and file some video and file some results. And they decided not to. So for me, I thought that was a little bit interesting to see those guys decide, you know what, I actually don't need to be involved. Because 37, to me, that happens every year, a little bit here and there. But having it happen with 37 guys, I thought was a little peculiar, because I thought that there would be more interest from those guys of being able to jump into the fray and kind of plant their flag and say, yeah, I'm here. This is what I'm about. And this is what I want to represent. But apparently the value wasn't there to a lot of those guys, which I didn't anticipate.
Yeah, I will go to my grave believing that, though they say speed and these 3 cone tests, it means nothing to us. 1, you keep doing it.
Right.
2, Peter Godber went 3rd overall. So obviously, yeah. And 3, you wouldn't send a guy like Peter Godber home from that story if the interviews were really the important thing, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the difference for Godber, who's an interior offensive lineman, if he runs 5.1 or 5.0, maybe that doesn't mean anything to you. But I heard it described at least as you're establishing a baseline of athleticism.
Yeah.
That if you meet this level of athleticism, cool, you can play in the Canadian Football League. If you're below it, I don't know that you're going to be able to play in the Canadian Football League, and we should probably just eliminate you from our draft board entirely. That would make sense to me. But this thought that there's nothing to it, and Sam Jaguar, who, what was he, like 4.38 or 4.34 back in the day, didn't get special looks and didn't linger in the CFL longer because he was the record holder for the combine probably pre Tavon Campbell. I don't know if that is who the 40 record holder is. That doesn't pass the smell test with everything that goes on. So guys train for it. I mean, you brought up, we talked about Kyle Borsa, the running back for the Regina Rams on our show. Tell me that guy wasn't training forever to, I mean, 1, to be a better football player, but 2, to absolutely murder the combine. His numbers were unbelievable.
Yeah.
He did more on the bench than Logan Bandy, who's going to go in the first round as an offensive lineman. That's incredible athleticism. And that's the dude. If a running back comes on and he doesn't have 26-inch arms, like if he has reasonable arms, it's not super stumpy, and he pumps out 22 on the bench press at 200 pounds, like does more than his body weight 22 times on the bench press, I go, oh, okay, I need to pay attention to this guy, because this guy has worked his butt off to just get here. Imagine what he's going to do when he gets here.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to put into context for people kind of what that bench press number means, because to scouts and evaluators, the bench press is not, if we're sitting there at Everest Place, like I say, on a Friday night during CFL week of 2017 or 18, and we see somebody who goes up and they launch, 25 reps of 225 pounds and they only weigh 195 pounds, you're thinking to yourself, well, that's just like a cool Olympic strength event, feats of great strength and all the rest. But for me, what that means to a lot of scouts that I've talked to in the past, what that means is that person only gets to that number not because they started lifting weights last week. Like that's a discipline. That's what that means. That shows character, that shows commitment. So that, as much as that shows strength, that's more about your personality, which I don't think a lot of fans realize, that is building up that score. And I'm a great test case of this. I can do bench press in my garage for 3 months hard, and my weight and my ability and my reps will go, they'll just skyrocket. And then I'll stop because I got my wisdom teeth taken out, and I won't lift a weight for a couple of weeks. I won't do anything. I won't pick up a weight. I won't go for, it's the same as going for a run. People that do that, or a spin class, anything like that, if you end up dedicating yourself to it consistently, you will get better over time. That's how people train to run marathons, half marathons, all the rest. You can't just decide one day, I'm going to go for a jog and run a half marathon and ace it. I mean, some people can because they're athletic freaks, but that bench press number from Kyle Borsa, to your point, to be that size and to be able to put up that number, to them, that screams, I have been working at this because I care about this. And that's more important to them than the actual number or the strength. So the strength on the field is an added bonus. Like if you have an offensive lineman who has the ability to chuck that thing around 25, 30, 35 times, huge benefit. Locking out your arms, being able to control somebody at the line of scrimmage, less likely to take holding penalties, all the rest. That stuff matters. But if you're a quarterback, like I remember somebody saying to me when I was in university, for every push that a quarterback does, every push exercise, whether it's a med ball toss or a bench press or anything like that, quarterbacks need to do twice as many pulls. That's actually something important, I think, for any coaches that are listening is for your quarterbacks, for every push, do twice as many pulls. That means pull-ups, that means rows, that whatever that means, eccentric push-ups, whatever that is. And the reason for that, it was like, the bench press doesn't mean anything to a quarterback. It's actually bad for you because the more bench press you do, the more your shoulders anatomically are going to roll forward over time because you're training your body to constantly be pressing forward. And so I said, as a quarterback, I want you standing in the pocket tall, shoulders back, ready to release the football and be accurate with it, rolling your shoulders forward, giving yourself bad posture. That's actually bad for you as a quarterback. So a lot of the times you won't even see quarterbacks decide to go ahead and do bench press at a testing setup like the CFL Combine. And the reason for that is not because they're being prima donnas or they're weak or they don't really trust themselves. The reason for it is that they haven't trained for it because it doesn't actually help their discipline whatsoever. And I always find that to be kind of an interesting twist on this too, is people see did not participate in something like a 40 for a running back. And we're like, man, real lost opportunity. That guy wants to let his game film do the talking on his speed. Maybe he has a tweaked hammy. You know what I mean? Like there's things that pop up that I think we take a lot of the combine evaluation at face value, and we don't necessarily need to. There are things that everybody comes from a unique situation and has to figure out as they're going through the draft process and the combine process, what they want to put on film. I will say this. I don't want to put this person on blast because I don't want them necessarily to get made fun of and all the rest, but there was someone who did not post a number that they should have on the bench press in their testing. You can go through the numbers and peel through them as you wish, but for their position, it was an extremely inadequate number to be invited to a national combine and put up that bench press number. But I have access to the virtual combine film. And whenever I have a question about how somebody looked, how a test went, I go to that virtual combine film and I'm like, I'm going to watch this for myself and see if this is real. I went to this person's film and what I saw was they did their bench press in what looked like their family garage. Okay. Yeah. Which is the funny part of this virtual combine setup is that it's like, you know, people standing in their living rooms with their mom and dad measuring their arm lengths and stuff. But which I mean is extremely CFL in the first place. But this bench press was done in a garage, and in the background was a huge poster of Nicolas Cage in Con Air. And I was like, okay, I was like, this person did not test the way that they should have based on their position and the requirements of their position on the bench press. With that being said, I would like to double their results based on the poster of Nicolas Cage in Con Air with the long hair and the white muscle shirt and the jeans and the large belt. And so there's these funny kind of weird moments that you get through the combine testing where you're like, you start to realize these are human beings that are doing their best. Some have more discipline, some have more exposure to great training, some have the money and the access and the resources to be able to work with personal trainers to raise their levels. But it's really just about getting into the league, which is all a long-winded way of saying that the numbers, I think, do matter to these scouts. And I think that these players do care about it, but there's so much more than just, hey, that guy ran a 4.4. That instructs what this whole draft process is about. And that's why I love the combine, because it's not just a numbers game. I play with the numbers, but the numbers educate me on a 5,000 different things that we can talk about and analyze rather than sitting there and saying, hey, that guy looked fast, which is the way that we used to do things. I think we've evolved past that and we should celebrate it.
Well, and that's an interesting point because speed is a relative thing, right?
Yes.
Like if you and I have a foot race, Marshall is fast and Derek is slow. If you have a foot race with, let's pick out random name here, Grant McDonald, linebacker from Calgary, Grant is fast and Marshall is slow. Yeah. Right. So then you would lose that, right? When you're watching film, like, oh, okay, well, that guy looks great. But how does he look when he gets to the pro level? Yes. And now, okay, so at least there is this to go, okay, well, in a perfect combine, everybody is laser timed and and 4.5 is this, and 4.65 is this, and 5.05 is this. We can, as smart football people, extrapolate something from that. It's just, yeah, the thought that we don't care about it just makes me.
I was going to say, I'll say this as well about that concept. And I explained this a little bit with you on the cage, but when I went into this process, and I want to, I'm using my platform here on the CFP podcast to, if there's any players out there that are listening and they think, who is this idiot who's evaluating me because he was never a good athlete in his own right? You're absolutely correct. And I went through combine settings, virtual combines, real combines, testing every year when I was at McMaster. I was not athletic. Like I looked at some of the quarterbacks here. I'll pull up Andreas Dueck is the quarterback from McMaster. He's a Winnipeg native, and he was in the virtual combine this year, and he measured in at 6'2" and 2/8, 203 pounds. He put up 8 on the bench, and he ran a 5 seconds flat 40. The most I ever did on the bench was 4. The fastest I was ever timed was 5 flat, and it was hand timed in my first year of university. By the time that I was 3rd, 4th, 5th year, I couldn't run a 5 electronically timed. I went to the East-West Bowl. I think I was like a 5.12 or something like that. So like you say, with it all being relative, I look at these things and I think to myself, all of these guys have put in so much work that when I went into the evaluation process in the combine and I heard that it was a virtual combine and I heard that the CFL was going to treat these all as unofficial results, naturally my first thought, DT, was, well, I can't even save these in my charts, because they're going to be meaningless, because it's not standardized and guys are going to be trying to cheat doing all these things. And hell, they might have. But once I actually got my hands on the numbers and I started to peel through them, I realized the CFL has gone to great lengths to try and legitimize these as much as possible. And it's not square peg round hole legitimizing. It is, listen, if somebody looks like they cheated, or we do the research and look at your height and your weight, or we look at how fast you look on game film, you can't turn a 7-second 40-yard dash guy into a 4.5. So what they've done is gone here and said, listen, if you're tweaking a little bit here and there, we've overlaid our own timing system. We've tried to make sure that this is being held accountable as much as possible to give our teams and our evaluators the best possible data to educate themselves on you moving forward. So I went into this thinking, well, I can't use this stuff. And then I saw how much effort had gone into that from the CFL. And then I saw the performances that came out, and I thought, okay, there's a lot of great testers here. Would there have been as many great testers if we were in a normal combine setting? Maybe not, but maybe, right? And I start to look at it, and you start to realize, like, maybe this is just a really talented, really athletic group at certain positions. And you start to realize there's still the bottom end to go with the top end. So if we still have the bottom end, and the bottom end at some points is a pretty extreme bottom end on the testing here, then we're not having the entire thing getting shifted upwards because the virtual combine was worth an extra 0.2 of a second on your 40-yard dash. And so that's why I started to come back at this and think to myself, no, this matters. Like these guys put in the effort. The CFL has legitimized this. And I would like to look at this as being legitimate as possible and to reward their efforts by being able to treat it as, this is the gospel. This is the information that we've been given, and I'm going to use it to the best of my abilities to advocate for these players and discuss them on the platforms that I have, to give them the shine, the love that's required after years and years of training for what are these stupid tests that you're never going to have to do again once you actually become a football player and you're in the CFL.
Yeah. The interesting thing that the data can bear out in years to come is this year an aberration because guys had essentially 12 months to just get ready for a combine?
Yeah.
Or were they, I mean, it seems weird in a strong athletic year, but were they hurt by the fact that they didn't play football this year? And emotionally, it's been a very tough year. Psychologically, it's been a very tough year. Did that actually make them test worse than you think they might have? There's a lot of things that, or, I mean, that may all even out and may not have mattered in the end. And this is just a fantastic year. And it's the effects, both positive and negative, just even out to be every other year. That would be interesting. Your guy who didn't do much on the bench, the Con Air guy, receiver or offensive lineman, was it one of those?
I don't want to say.
No, you don't have to name him, but was it a receiver?
I mean, people are going to be able to tell pretty easily if you peel through the numbers here, unfortunately. But I'll say it's a big man. That's the biggest hint that I will give you on that.
Yeah.
one,
okay. Yeah. I pulled up the combine numbers just to see. I'm like, the ones that stood out were an offensive lineman and a receiver.
Yeah.
Props to the kicker who put up 9 on the bench.
Okay, so this is actually what I wanted to get to here is, and
David Cote, well done.
So I don't know if we've covered all of our bases here on the combine chatter stuff. I do have kind of what I want to leap off at the end of the podcast with, which is kind of the best combine scores overall and looking at which positions did well and all of that. But I'm trying to think, is there anything else? Like, should we talk more about Ben Hladek before we bounce into anything else here? But
we should talk about Ben Hladek because you put out that radar chart.
Yeah.
And radar charts they're criticized because depending on how you group it, people take the area, like it's essentially, 7-sided, and it's how far out it goes, and it creates this space. And if you treat the surface area of that space as their overall athleticism, you can be deceived by, we grouped all the high things on the one side, right? Hladek's, it doesn't matter how you grouped anything. It looked like he was 90th percentile in everything.
Yeah. So here is what I will give you that I have on Ben Hladek. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, and I'll be honest, I saw these raw numbers come across the timeline on social media, I want to say 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And immediately my reaction, because I am naturally a skeptic, especially with it being a virtual combine, was, okay, sure. Whatever, man. Like, yeah, of course. Yeah, you ran that fast at that weight. You jumped that far. You had that type of quickness after being able to bench that much. Sure. Good for you. You found a way to tweak the system. I don't know how you did it, but you're lying to me. And I know you're lying to me because that's not a thing. So I didn't trust this at all. And then I got an email from Pat Tracy, who's a former defensive coordinator for the Queens Gales when I was growing up in Kingston. He used to walk his dog around when I was playing catch with my friends when I was in high school. Might have been a recruiting violation for Queens, but whatever. We would talk with him when he was walking through the streets with his family. I think I went to school with his daughter as well at Frontenac Secondary in Kingston. So I ended up getting an email from Pat, and he does an incredible job every year. He'll reach out to me and say, I've got Stavros Katsantonis, and I've got, who was the name of the defensive back, long, lanky guy that went to Calgary in the draft that was UBC that got popped for a positive test and had to sit out a year, but
wasn't that Stavros?
It was him and his teammate as well, whose name I'm blanking on because
I'll Google it while you tell the
story. Yeah. So anyways, he does a great job of reaching out and he kind of educates myself and some of the other guys that cover the CFL draft on the backgrounds of these players. And when he reached out to me and he said, hey, just so you know, Ben's numbers are going to be unbelievable. You need to believe him. And he said, here's the backstory. Here's who he is. Here's what he's about. Here's his education background. Here's what he's done for me. Here's where he's played in my defense. I wish every U Sports coach would over communicate in that way with me covering the draft, because it gave me the sense that, yeah, of course he's going to bat for his guy, but I also trust that Pat a lot. And so when he goes out there and gives me that background, that information, I now get to go back to the game film and compare it to what I'm seeing in this testing film. And I say to myself, holy hell, that's an incredible performance by that guy. Like that's something that's really, really special. So when you say that you believe he is in the 90th percentile, let me read these out for you. First, just the raw stuff on Ben Hladek and how special this performance was by him. Okay. Because usually what we see, as I said off the top, is tall guy, long wingspan, who has a great broad jump and a great vert, doesn't have a great quickness, shuttle 3-cone time, doesn't do well in the bench press because his arms are too long. It makes it more difficult. Or I see somebody who is a running back like a Kyle Borsa, who is short and very compact, great quickness scores, good on the bench press, not great long speed with the 40-yard dash, and they don't jump well because they don't have the length to be able to get out and cover ground, that kind of thing. So when I see a performance like this with Ben Hladek, where I punch in the numbers and I see that his combine score is 97, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, that means that amongst all of the tests that he did, which in this case is 5 tests because they didn't do the vert and they didn't do the 10 and the 20. So I'm having 3 of those tests eliminated from my usual 8, but I have 5. He did them all. I've seen them all with my own eyes on YouTube. I'm hearing from his coach. Amongst all those tests, compared to all the other linebackers, which, by the way, he was being compared to 275 other linebackers in the history of the CFL Combine, he averages being in the 97th percentile through 5 athletic tests. Okay? So that's the start point here. He is listed at 6'4" flat, 239 pounds, 29 reps on the bench at 225 pounds. Okay, so that's a great number. Think about whatever weight you are, bench pressing that 29 times, because that's what he did in that spot. Then you think, okay, well, he's a big, strong guy, but how can he run? 4.67 in the 40-yard dash. So he's sub 4.7 for a man who's 240 pounds, who also has the power and the meat on his chest to be able to put that up nearly 30 times. Then you start to look at his broad. It was, where did he get to? 10 feet, 7 inches. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then you look at his shuttle time. It was 4.17. I've known a hell of a lot of receivers and running backs and DBs who weigh 180 pounds who would kill to have a 4.17 shuttle time. That quickness of your hands on the ground, bang, get out, shuffle, touch, back 10 yards, touch, back 5 yards, touch, done. To do that in 4.17 seconds is freaky. And then the one for me, the 3-cone, which I always for linebackers love looking at the 3-cone time, because linebacker play is ball comes up, play action. I take a step forward, I take a step back. I read, I have to react. Oh, I've got the flats. Oh, look, the running back's leaking to the flats. Turn, run, get around an offensive lineman out in front. It's a screen. Get there, make a tackle. It's the 3-cone to me is such a great drill to be able to show someone's ability to flip their hips, stay low to the ground, be athletic, but be fast in burst, turn the corner with speed. And he ends up posting a 6.67. Now, the percentiles in the height percentile for the other 275 linebackers all time compared in CFL history, which, I mean, if you want to pick any name in here, you can do that. Just quickly, I will sort my chart here just to give you some names and the idea of, because I don't want you to think that he's being compared to some schlubs or something like that. So some of the names that it's comparing to the all-time great workout scores when it comes to linebackers in the CFL draft. Fredo Plessius, Enoch Mwamba, Jacob Janke was actually from 2019 who tested super highly. Mike Edom, Jesse Briggs, Sam Hurl, Byron Archambault from the University of Montreal, Alexander Chevrier, who I believe is still out there in Saskatchewan, if I'm not mistaken. Wilkerson D'Souza was a great linebacker from the U of T. Ron O'Mara was in the CFL for a while. Paul Kozacek is still in the CFL. Jeff Hughes was a good special teamer from out there in Sask. Who else do I got in here? DJ LaLama is still in the league. Corey Greenwood tested in here, who's obviously still doing his thing in the CFL after being in the NFL. Shamari Williams is now working out at UBC, I'm not mistaken. He tested back in the day. I've got his data. Jeff Hecht is in here. Mitchell Bosch from Laurier. Micah Tights. On and on and on and on and on and on and on it goes. There's legitimate guys that he is being compared to, okay? In terms of his height percentile that I mentioned here, that I wanted to be able to kind of paint the picture for you, he's already a monster. He's in the 98th percentile when it comes to height. For weight, he's in the 93rd percentile. Again, these aren't even factoring into his combine score. These are just measurables.
Tallest and heaviest,
yeah. Yeah, tallest and heaviest. His bench press is in the 96th percentile.
Strongest.
His 40-yard dash is in the 96th percentile.
Fastest. This sounds like an Olympic motto after a while here.
His broad jump, after being what we've already said, is one of the heaviest, one of the tallest, one of the strongest, and also one of the fastest. His broad jump, lower body explosion test, is in the 99th percentile.
Most explosive, yeah. And
then his shuttle is in the 97th percentile, and his 3-cone that I already told you why I value it so highly for linebackers, he is 99.21 is the percentile that so like you look at the grand scheme of things for Ben Hladek and you're like, what the hell is this dude? And honestly, for me, he went from, oh, that's a nice player, to, wow, he could be a really good high draft pick, to, did he just play himself out of the CFL? Like, did he just test? Did he just test himself completely out of the CFL and into an NFL late round draft pick, or an undrafted free agency priority post draft selection, or a free agent contract? Because I think what you're going to see now is, and this is the tricky dance of the CFL draft, as we know, DT. What we see is you'll end up having people that will go from, I don't know if he's going to be the guy, to, oh, he's a nice player, to, oh, he's a really good player, to, actually, you know what? He's played himself into the NFL, maybe a contract status, which means I now have to take him the other direction. And now he goes, instead of from 4th to 3rd to 2nd to 1st round, now he starts going 1st to 2nd to 3rd to 4th round. And again, where he lands anywhere in between there at this point, that's anybody's guess for me, but that's how much of a monster this guy is.
Well, and the NFL right now is looking for guys who can cover tight ends.
Yes.
Kyle Pitts is going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. Generational tight end, next great thing. But there's a handful of guys that are uncoverable at tight end. What do you need to cover those guys who are strong and fast and tall and can change direction? Well, you'd love to have a guy who's strong and fast and tall to change and can change direction incredibly well. So those numbers will absolutely get him a look down south. Someone's paying attention to that and going, we need to at least see if this can translate to our game, because there are, like you say, when you're in the 99 point blah blah percentile of anything, there are very few people on earth, period, that do what you do. So that cat is going to get a look from the NFL. Come on, he's got to.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I'm excited for him. I hope that it goes super well. I'm looking forward to getting him on a CFP podcast here as quickly as possible and just discuss, hey, what the hell are you and how did this happen? The thing that I find amazing is his teammate, Elliot Graham. I'll just list this off for you. Height, 94th percentile. Weight, 96th percentile. Bench, 78th percentile. 40-yard dash, 67th percentile. Pretty decent. Then his broad, 95th percentile. Shuttle, 90th percentile. True cone, 89th percentile. His workout score,
really good.
For Elliot Graham, he was in the 84th percentile. He and Ben Hladek are the only people to be in the elite category, which is above 80% in the percentile for your overall workout. They're teammates. Like, how did UBC, along with that, not absolutely destroy because that to me is why, when I mentioned earlier, looking at Calgary's offensive line and UBC's linebacker court, that right there is why I looked at it and I was like, I have to go watch this, because these are some of the very best players available in the CFL draft this year. Now, again, comparing film from 2019 to athletic prowess of 2021 is a tricky balancing act, because it might just be a different player, might be healthier than ever before when he's testing. He might never be this athletic again. He might, things happen when you get into the league and your career otherwise. But I think what I'm most excited about for Ben Hladek and people like him that have tested super well, which I'll get to in a second here, is Michael Falds, the head coach of the Laurier Golden Hawks, told me here on CFP at the start of the pandemic, I think it was the start of June, when they had just announced that the season was shut down for U Sports. And I asked him, what do you think you're going to get on the other side of this when it comes to players? He said there's 3 distinct types of players. The first category of guys, which is going to be probably about 30% of people on every team, CFL and U Sports, are players that will look at this and say, oh man, that's too tough. I can't do that. This is hell. This is tough on me mentally, physically. I can't. And I totally get that. And Falk said he totally gets that. It's unprecedented. That's the reality. He said that's going to be about 30% of guys, unfortunately. He said what you're going to have for another, it would be about 50% or so, is that you're going to end up having people who will do enough. They'll get by. They won't really look at it as an opportunity. They'll just kind of try to maintain. And then the last 20% is going to be the players who will look at COVID in this pandemic and having to create cinder blocks and build home gyms out of plywood and buy dumbbells from online and be lifting in your garage every day, or going to the park and doing sprints where you're allowed to legally. Shout out to Ontario. But the idea of all of those things, you've got, 30% of guys are going to give up on it. 50% are going to say, well, I'll do what I have to, I guess. And then 20% are going to look at it, embrace it as an opportunity, and get better from it. And when they come back, and I think in the CFL, it's going to be pretty easy to tell who was in that bottom 30%, who was in that middle 50, and who's in that top 20%. In the CFL Combine, we just saw who the top 20% is. We just saw with these metrics who are the guys who said, I'm actually going to use this as an opportunity to get better, not to just exist. And for me, that's exciting, because those guys absolutely deserve the credit and the attention that they have owned here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to pull up the NFL calculator to punch in Ben Hladek's numbers. I'll put them up tomorrow just to see how it compares, because that is kooky talk. That's
okay, love it.
Kooky talk, and that's why I love that you're doing this stuff, because we need to acknowledge that, man, we can make some athletes in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of giving these guys more credit and being able to show people at all different areas of football that, yeah, we're talking about expanding our borders and going international, and that's great. Which, by the way, I plan on doing all of this hopefully in like 10 years when we have 10 years worth of data for the global combine, and being able to say,
Yes.
okay, who's the Ben Hladik of Finland that we've never seen this person before come from this position? You know what I mean? So I think that that's going to be fun down the road as well. But I'll be interested to find out what that NFL calculator has to say on performance and score and all that. But I wonder, do you think he gets drafted? Like, I think his game film speaks well. He's not just a tester. Like, he's going to have the opportunity to get picked up, but I don't know if he's actually going to get a draft pick spent on him, because we've seen athletic freaks before from Canada who don't get picked up, but they get swept up hella quick once they actually get through the draft process.
I wonder if you go far enough down, I mean, you'd have to be okay. Let's check out some film for a guy we might take a shot at in the 7th round. I wonder. Those numbers have to put you on the radar, though. If I can find his vertical. Do you remember his vertical off the top of your head? I don't have it here.
I don't. They actually didn't test the vertical for these guys. I think because the Vertex wasn't available. So the only 5 tests we had were the bench, the 40, which it's funny. I really missed being. Oh no, I really missed having the 10 and the 20. Because one of my favorite things is to see who accelerates at a high rate, and for offensive and defensive linemen, who gets out of the blocks really well. But like, based on his lower body explosion tests and based on his 40 time, his 10-yard probably would have been in the 99th percentile. His 20-yard would have been in the 99th. Like, everything about his testing was so incredibly elite.
So this is a website, and just one I caught onto in the last little bit, because he puts out some good stuff on Twitter. And it just ranks guys compared to every other buddy at their position. This guy is the 1,300 out of 1,375 linebackers we've ever tested, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's neat, and it shows you, oh, this guy will not be drafted because his score is terrible. Relative athletic score for linebackers who have been taken in the NFL, on a scale of 0 to 10, Hladik score is 9.98. His 40-yard is isn't elite.
Not good enough, Ben. How dare you?
But height, weight, bench, broad, like all just super elite. And that's, best of luck to him, because he's going to have opportunities based on tests that are very meaningful and teams care about. I will die on this hill.
All right, so let's wrap this up by me giving you the grand scheme of things. So what I do is I take the combine scores that are, as I've said earlier, that average of your combine percentiles for each of the 5 tests that are available through this virtual combine, average them out. Then I plug them all into a big chart here. And what I do is sort them by the best overall combine score, regardless of position, affiliation, school, anything else to go with it. And Ben Hladik obviously comes out as the top-ranked combine performance. 97.32 is his combine score. In second place is Regina Rams running back Kyle Borsa, 94.86. 94.86 is where he went. In third and fourth and fifth, I love this, and this is part of the reason why I love the combine, is dudes just come out of left field. At number 3, Western Mustangs receiver Griffin Campbell, 91.49. And I gotta admit, I don't know a whole hell of a lot about Griffin Campbell, but he's up there running around with the Hladiks and the Borses in this combine setting, and I was like, that's amazing. At number 4, he led the OUA in interceptions with 5 in 2019. Daniel McWhirter, who shockingly similar to Jay Dearborn. It was the first thing that jumped out to me. Carlton Raven, long, lanky, plays the ball well, but he gets a 90.14. Then at number 5, and this is why I waited off on having this conversation. At number 5, David Cote from Laval, kicker. Compared to and again, smaller sample size, because for the kickers, I'll look up how many guys I have here in combine history. There have been only 35 kickers who have tested, and those names include Vincent Dubé, Rob Maver, Chris Milo, Sean Stinger, Gabriel Ferraro. Who else? I got Hugh O'Neill's in here, Tyler Carpina, Jonathan Heidebrecht, Michael Domagala, Lewis Ward, David Deschamps, Stephen Fabian, who was a great kicker from Alberta that I love, Ronnie Pfeffer, Felix Menard-Briere, Quinn Van Gelswick, Zach Medeiros, Liam Hiralahu, Brett Lowther. So those are the guys he's being compared to. And even at that, okay, I want to throw this out there. He has the second, David Cote I'm talking about from Laval this year, second greatest kicker testing performance in the history of kickers in a CFL Combine. The best is Felix Menard-Briere at the East Regional Combine in 2017. He had a combine score of 88.15, and you have David Cote here with an 85.27, good for second all time.
Cote had the fastest shuttle in the country of anybody. Anybody.
Kickers are freaky.
Which makes me go, are these, and he's 6'4", 223? Like, I just, is this a typo?
I don't know. It's so strange, man. But I guess if any place is going to have
a linebacker,
if any place is going to have an alien kicker, it's going to be the place that gave us Boris Bidet, right? Like you're going to end up having somebody who's a freaky, weird body type. Laval does that because that's what they target. But so he's the fifth best workout in 2021, which I know is going to excite you going forward. When he gets drafted, you're going to get to talk about him ad nauseum, which is great. At number 6, it's offensive lineman out of Calgary, Peter Nicastro, with an 84.91. At number 7, it's Elliot Graham, the linebacker from UBC, teammate of Ben Hladek that I talked about. At number 8, it's another Calgary offensive lineman to go with Peter Nicastro. So Calgary's O-line gets the number 6 best workout and number 8 best workout. At number 9, it's an under-the-radar guy, Alex Smith, who is not the guy who just retired from the National Football League. It is an offensive lineman from Acadia, who I didn't know a lot about, but he was barely behind Packer and Nicastro. So the AUS gets a top 10 performance in the combine. At number 10, Alain Simonkinda is a defensive lineman, defensive end, who was at Guelph in 2019, transferred to go home to Ottawa and play for Carleton in 2020, never got to play for them, and is now entering the draft as a Carleton Raven. So he's the 10th best workout. And then the other ones that I'll just kind of sprinkle in here in the top 20, Retta Cramdy is a long, lanky defensive back from Montreal. Wyatt Edmonds is the offensive lineman from McMaster. Interior guard, super small, doesn't weigh enough. Like he's like basically 6 flat, 270 something, short arms, just tested freakishly well though. So he's in the top 20. Tommy Neild, fellow McMaster Marauder receiver, tested extremely well. He's in there. Nelson Lacumbo comes in at 14th.
Wow. On
this combine list. And for linebackers, it's funny because there was so much hype about Nelson Lacombe, and rightfully so. On the football field, there's no denying what he's about. But he had 2 other linebackers that were ahead of him. And in terms of defenders ahead of him in combine scores, it was Ben Hladek, it was Daniel McWhirter from Carleton that I mentioned, it was Elliot Graham, the other UBC Thunderbird, Alain Simonkinda from Guelph/Carleton, Retta Cramdy, another defensive back was in there. So he's actually the 3rd defensive back when it comes to combine score, which I didn't expect. But at the same time, I'm never going to take a strip off Nelson Lacombe for saying you're not athletic enough, because he has absolutely everything he needs to be a CFL player.
He's a little short and a little light, right? Yeah. I assume by the percentiles.
Yes, he is. But actually, let me check in on him real quick, just because we didn't touch enough on Nelson, because I have a lot of respect for this dude. So I want to give him his fair play. But before I finish out the top 20 here and we wrap up, but he, let me see.
5'10" 3/4, 184.
Yeah. So in terms of the percentiles for him, height percentile 45th. Yeah. Weight percentile, and again, keep in mind, this is against DBs, which are not typically heavy dudes. He's only in the 22nd percentile when it comes to weight. So he's a super light and a little bit small guy. His bench was 34th percentile. And then moving forward, his 40 was 76th. And then you get to the money categories for Nelson. This is the stuff that really matters for DBs. Broad, he was in the 82nd, shuttle 98th, 3-cone 96th. So again, like he's right there. He has everything he needs to. As you say, DT, he's just a little bit smaller. But and then the other names that I'll throw in here in the back end of the top 20, Lacombo's at 14. Ethan McConzo, a linebacker from the University of Montreal, is in there at 76 is his combine score, 15th. Isaac Evans at 16, a defensive lineman. Trevor Hoyt, another linebacker. It's a great linebacker class, freaky athletic from Carleton. Jonathan Breton-Robert from Laval, a receiver, is the 18th best combine score. Glodin Malali, who you heard on All-Canadian with Wade and Connor, he is in at the 19th spot. And then Logan Bandy is the 20th best workout score overall amongst all participants. Now, again, just to give you a sense for where the athleticism is coming from specifically in this draft class. And again, all of these things can be parsed in different ways, but for defensive backs in the top 25, you had 4 DBs. Matt Watson from Mount Allison was in there with Nelson Lacombo, Retta Cramby, and Daniel McWhirter. When it comes to defensive linemen, you only had 2 in the top 20. That was Elaine Simikinda from Guelph/Carleton that I mentioned, and then Isaac Evans. When it comes to linebackers, top 25, you've got Charlie Moore, Jarek Richards from St. Mary's, Trevor Hoyt from Carleton, Ethan McConzo from Montreal, Elliot Graham from UBC, and Ben Haddock from UBC. The linebackers, you would expect they're athletic freaks, but that's still pretty amazing to see all of those guys involved in being that athletic. And then the receivers, because people are always interested in that, not a single receiver this year in the top 10 for combine scores, which is different than when we had Keon Julian Grant came out at the same time as, was it Richards that was the Mount Allison kid? I'm trying to remember. There was a 3-pack of, there was Osi Kusi from Queens alongside Richards, I believe, from Mount A, and Keon Julian Grant from St. FX. All 3 of those guys were in the top 10. This year, nobody's in the top 10. It's Tommy Neal at 13, Jonathan Breton-Robert at 18, Glodin Mullally at 19, and then Matthew Gledhill from Acadia is out there at 24, and Matthew Robitaille from Laval is 25th. So not a super athletic receiving group necessarily that you would typically see.
Yeah, I assume the American guy, the NCAA guys, the Janas, the Palmers will make up the receivers that are going high in this year's draft.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd have to think so. Anything else you want to get in here, DT? Let people know where they can check you out again on the Sports Cage. Anything you have coming up the rest of the week?
Oh, God, we're talking. Well, it's going to be a lot of CFL on Wednesday, we suspect, with the announcement that Rash Madani says is coming. So TSN CFL insider Farhan Lalji joins us every Wednesday. We always enjoy that. We're winding down the WHL season, but we're a lot of football all the time. So 620ckrm.com. It's the Sports Cage, wherever you get finer podcasts. Love to have you in 4 to 6:30 Saskatchewan time, which is 6 to 8:30 Eastern time, or 3 to 5:30 Pacific time. If you're in Hawaii, I don't know what time it is, but I will come there and learn it if you let me stay at your house for a year. That's all.
I mean, June Jones lets Tony Finau stay at his house whenever he wants, so it's a possibility. I mean, you should probably open the door there with June. He'd probably allow that. But it's a great show, and you should check it out. Absolutely. We want to remind you again on the way out here. Any coaches listening to this, any players that are listening to this, because you're interested in CFL Combine stuff, it's caught your imagination, like what we're doing at CFP, let your coaches know. Canadian Football Perspective is brought to you by Fox 40, and if they need any return-to-play technology, whistles, otherwise, use the promo code CFP15 at checkout, and they'll get 15% off for all of their whistle needs. We want to help out the grassroots stuff here that enjoy listening to our podcast, and we want to give them a bit of a discount, which is why Fox 40 has been nice enough to allow us to that. And if everybody in Ontario needs some beer to drink, which I think we all do at this point because we're all sitting in our homes avoiding each other, Sawdust City Brewing are great partners. Sam Corbet, looking forward to having another tasting with him coming up. That'll be up on our YouTube channel on Friday of this week. But they offer brewery fresh beer delivered directly to your door. You can visit their website at sawdustcitybeer.com to shop their wide variety. And of course, this April, you're getting an exclusive promo code from them. Free shipping on all orders inside Ontario that are over $100. I'm looking forward to checking out. They have something like a passion fruit mango guava IPA thing that's supposed to be coming out, I believe. And for those of you that don't know this, I want to reiterate how much fun it is partnering with a beer company, because I've always wanted to be a partner with a brewery because I like my Ontario craft beer, and I think that people that work in beer are typically great, interesting people with great stories and backgrounds and imaginations. I just want to mention this on the way out. There's a beer that Sawdust City makes that's called Lone Pine that I think is 6.5%, and it's intended to taste like a pine branch slap you across the face with every single sip. Like it has that piney resin. It's this great IPA that when I take a sip and close my eyes, I'm just at a campfire. It's super crisp. It's super refreshing. So I told Sam Corbet on the first ever happy hour tasting that we posted on our YouTube channel, hey, I love Lone Pine. I think it's an incredible beer. It's the reason why I reached out to you guys, because I thought you make great beer, and this was the one that caught my attention. And he just, I don't know if he was supposed to say this, but he just kind of like teased. He goes, well, coming up this fall, we're actually right now working on and canning something that we're calling Lone Pine wine. And I was like, what is that? I'm like, are you making a wine that tastes like the woods? And he said, well, it's not actually a wine. It's an 11% beer version of what we already have in our 6.5 ABV of the Lone Pine beer. And I was like, that's A, incredibly dangerous, and B, incredibly amazing. Because when he says we're making an 11% beer that just tastes basically double the amount of like, a Christmas tree in your mouth, I was like, I hope that people that like IPAs hear that and you're like, wow, these guys think outside the box. That's super fun. And I'd like to be able to support them as a thank you for supporting us, which is what we want you to do, to go and check out everything that they have going on, because they have a lot of great stuff that's available in Ontario. And if you want to have a beer coming up on the weekend, then I suggest you get your order in with them. They ship out Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they got a lot of great stuff to be able to offer up to you. DT, thank you. I do appreciate this. Is the most normal that I've felt since they decided to rip pieces of my bone out of my skull.
I like it. I like it. Next week, we need to talk about best and worst draft picks from the last 5 or 10 years, because we'll only get one more pod before the actual CFL Canadian draft.
Yes, that's true. We are essentially like 2 weeks out from draft night. I mean, that's pretty wild to think. But also, we need to decide what we're doing on draft night, because it's going to be way too late for us to tape on a Tuesday at midnight. But who knows? If people are interested enough, maybe we'll throw it out there for you. If you want us to do something creative with draft night on May 4th, then we can do a reaction podcast maybe together here and fire one up, and we'll see how that goes. But next week, yes, it'll be best draft picks of the last 5-10 years. That's Derek Taylor at DT on SC. I am Marshall Ferguson at Soft Guy, who's finally back on a microphone after whining and complaining on Twitter for a straight week about how his face hurts. I'm going to go put an ice bag on my face because I'm still soft. And thank you for listening, as always, to The Breakdown. Have yourselves a great day.
I'm Marshall. That's me.